Hey, you know what time of year it is. It's cold as fuck outside. I'm wearing a red hat. We decided to go tree in our living room for some reason. I don't know why we did that. They sell fake trees online. Well, I don't have anything specifically Christmas related to talk about. Something did come to the Nintendo Switch that intrigued me because it has appeared on the channel before. Nessy, the NES robot. I played 2 of its demos on the channel way before I even thought of doing this style of video, and they weren't bad demos. The character Nessy is the creation of fellow YouTuber Daniel T Gaming. Nessy is a tiny robot in the style of an NES controller, hence the name, and Daniel made a game about him with the help of his friends. The game came out 2 years ago, on June 18th, 2021, on itch.io, with there being some desire to release the game on Steam and Nintendo Switch. As far as I'm aware, and judging from the official Nessy dev account on Twitter, there really wasn't much talk after the initial release on itch.io, with there being some teasing of the future release on Steam and Switch, and announcements of updates to the itch.io version. In that time, Daniel T dropped the NES part of Nessy's name for copyright reasons, the official Nessy dev account got hacked for a couple days, and Nessy the Robot would become Game of the Month on Evercade VS. Huh? Then, on December 7th, Nessy the Robot came to Steam and Nintendo Switch. I don't know what any of these funky Shinza characters mean, but Polsky's calling out to me. So, this is pretty much just an emulator that only plays Nessy with some built-in Dadatki to look at when you're bored. The game itself, Nessy the Robot, is pretty decent as an indie NES game, but it doesn't really stand up to the actual NES library in my opinion. It's kind of lower-end NES game quality, better than Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, but I'd gravitate to anything else if I had the choice. The story is average in concept, boiling down to save the day, the levels are fun to run through, and the bosses are interesting. There are a few problems I noticed right off the bat. The Zapish Gray feature as of writing causes the game to slow to a crawl if you Zapish and or Vichitai, making the gameplay worse than actual NES games. This is probably just a conflict between the emulator and the menus that can be sorted out. There's also no counter for how many of these red gems I've collected, meaning there is no incentive for me to collect them at all. For all I know, they're just being sent off to Professor Oak for safekeeping. That bastard! Also, there are these circles in the top left corner that indicate the amount of health Nessy has, with the gems inconsistently healing him. This would be fine if it didn't feel pointless. Dying in Nessy doesn't really feel punishing or significant because there's barely a death animation. Nessy just flashes a sort of surprise face for a split second before the game restarts from the last checkpoint. This really doesn't feel like I died, it feels more like I accidentally loaded a save state on an emulator like Giga Fusion. What would help dying feel more significant is an actual animation. Every NES game has a form of animation that shows how you failed, so Nessy not exactly having one is kind of out of place. Also, an animation to indicate you took damage instead of whatever the hell this is would help too. Currently, Nessy's damage animation is just getting pushed in the opposite direction of the damage source without much of an expression from the little robot. This has ended in me either not noticing or caring, pushing through because fuck it, what's the point if I can just immediately restart from the last checkpoint as if nothing happened. Nonetheless, you'll get your money's worth with Nessy. The game has a fair amount of content to go through, as just like Super Mario 3D Land, the game literally doubles in length after you complete the main story via Negative World. Outside of Nessy and Negative World, you have some Shtuka and Test Dvcheku to look through, and there's some interesting stuff in here. With Shtuka, you have all these behind-the-scenes images, either being concept art or development screenshots. Test Dvcheku, on the other hand, gives you the entire game's soundtrack, which is pretty cool. For $10 USD, this is worth the money with everything in it. Unless you're the guy whom Daniel T talked about in this tweet. While I sort of agree on one of the points that a mentioned live streamer had supposedly said, I don't think the game's an outright scam. They probably didn't see everything the game has to offer. What I do agree on, though, what I just think in general on this point is Nessy's demos have only one level. That's fine. They're demos. But why does the official release have one level per world too? You do get Negative World, which is the same thing as Nessy the Robot, but a bit harder in no sort of pointless hub world. Negative World's levels sometimes seem to have a different layout to standard Nessy, plus the screen doesn't scroll, so you have to remember how the layout is to not fall into a pit or onto an enemy. Though, despite Negative World's existence, there is no excuse for Nessy the Robot to take roughly 30 minutes to complete. I could watch all 14 entries in the ASDF movie series in that amount of time and have some time left over to watch a couple of the deleted scenes videos. I'm not saying the game is bad for having less. The game just feels too short. Even just adding an extra level to each world would do wonders for length in my opinion. Though, you could also add some levels unrelated to pre-existing levels and achieve the same outcome. Either way, you're adding levels to the game, which is increasing the length of the experience so the game can be enjoyed for longer. Gameplay could also be refined with some extra additions added as well. I've brought up the lack of a gem counter and the weirdness of healing in Nessy, but there's also the lack of a boss health bar. This would be fine if it was something like Mario where the bosses don't require that many hits or were simple enough to understand, but why won't it die already? Some of these bosses are legitimately annoying to deal with, either because they aren't clear in the slightest, or just take bloody forever to beat. Would have been nice while fighting this flying jar of water with wings to know how close I was to beating it. Oh, and a note for Daniel, I'm sorry, but I think you might need to alter the behavior of this boss, cause... yeah... Also, I would have enjoyed an actual hint on what to do with the snowman boss, because it wasn't clear exactly what to do given the trend of just shooting until they're dead set by every other boss before this one. Also, to avoid spoilers, I'm not going to talk directly about this boss, but there is a boss in the game that is quite jarring to fight when you die. I expected the fight to fully reset after dying, like with every other NES game I've played, but it turns out this boss has checkpoints, and it wasn't clear for a good minute, so I felt like I got disoriented for a second when I died. I did figure out that the boss had checkpoints and the fight got a hell of a lot easier, but I shouldn't need to pull out the thinking cap and play Sherlock Holmes every time I die to figure out whether or not the boss has checkpoints. It should just be obvious. Taking a look through the Stuka, turns out there was a lot more planned for the game than was actually in it. There's full-on behind-the-scenes concept art showing some really cool ideas that would have made the game a whole lot better. And the way the game looks in some of the development screenshots looks really good too. The game is made in NES Maker, but I'm confused as to why some of this stuff just didn't make it in. Why the art style changed from this to this? Were the gameplay decisions simply rushing to get the game out sooner rather than later because you were getting tired of the project? The making of Nessy the NES robot doesn't really give any information on this, so I'm just stuck here confused. As it stands on Switch, because that's what I played this game on, Nessy is alright, but needs work. The game feels like one of those pretty cool games you'd find in a bargain bin next to Gummy Bears Mini Golf Beastly for Wii and Hannah Montana the movie for PS3. Like, it ended up there for a reason, but damn it is it much more worthy of being bought than most anything else there. If it is possible to implement these ideas and to refine the game down more, then cool. But it probably would have also been a good idea to use something like Godot instead of NES Maker, as you wouldn't have this conflict between the menus and emulator causing the game to slow to a crawl. You'd still be able to make an NES-style game that plays well, and you'd probably be able to implement a good portion of the ideas seen in these images. Would have been cool to see these robots throw plates at you or to swing on lights throughout the Cafe Bolt level. However, I'm pretty sure, judging from the nothing burger that is the making of Nessy the NES robot, that NES Maker was used because this was just a fun project, and I can respect that. I'm not going to diss a game for what engine it uses. Unless it's Unity. Of course, you don't have to listen to me if you don't want to. I'm just some prick who thinks the game still needs a touch of work and wanted to voice the ideas I had. Anyway, hope I wasn't too harsh. I was trying my best to point out things that, in my opinion, could be improved while still being nice, as I don't know everything that went on in the development of this game. I just have my own knowledge of how game development works and, well, my experience playing the game itself. For all I know, it could be impossible to add a boss health bar to the game because of some weird limitations with NES Maker, despite the fact that Mega Man does it and it's on the NES. So, Daniel, if you're watching, I hope you didn't take any of this personally and found some of it useful. I mean, that's sort of why I made the video, but also, I found the language tab finally after a little bit and set it to English because for some reason it was in Polish. What the hell is a start game?